Devin Olsen, and I am a Signature Tyer for Fulling Mill, and today we're going to be tying the purple variation of my blowtorch fly. So the blowtorch is a tag nymph, which is kind of a genre of attractor nymphs that are pretty common in Europe. And I first started tying a different variation of this back in 2014 at the World Championships in the Czech Republic, and then afterward I started messing around with color variations, and purple and pink in certain circumstances really happens to be a killer, but it's not one that's gotten as much press as some of the other variations. So that's why we wanted to tie that today. So we are starting with, this is a size 16 Jig Force, a 50-45, and I've got some 16-aught black thread here. We're just going to cover that shank. I like to go back and forth just to make sure I get a little thread base to improve the durability of the fly. And then we're going to tie in our tail, the fluorescent tag, hence the name Blowtorch here. So I have some Glo Brite number 1. That specific color I think is called fuchsia, if I remember right. And I've got one strand that I've kind of cut into thirds, and I thought I had them evened up, but I didn't, so we'll trim them so they're even. You don't want to go any more than 3 on this. I see a lot of people tie this fly and put way too much of this on the back and leave it way too long. So I've tied it in up behind the bead, and I'm just wrapping to the back, and I want to use the back of the hook shank there, or the bend of the hook, to rest my hook blade against that, and then that usually is my cutoff point. A lot of people leave that tag out to here, something like that. It's just supposed to be a trigger point on the fly. It's not supposed to dominate it. All right, then we're going to tie in some silver wire. And I put that just in the little recess of the slot on the bead there. And then one more thing that's going to go over the top before we put the dubbing on is just some medium pearl tinsel. Wrap that back. All right, now we've got the tinsel tied on, and we're going to use some Purple Microflash UV dub from Fulling Mill here. And we want to go really light. It's really easy with these kind of coarser synthetic dubbings. Even though this is microflash, and it dubs a lot easier than some of the other flashy dubbings that I've used, you still want to go really light. Just grab a few fibers at a time. You can always add more later, but you don't want to go too much to begin with either, because it's harder to take off than it is to add. All right, double little noodle, and we're just going to come about, actually I put one wrap too many there. Looks like I need just a smidge more. I do like to get progressively fatter, kind of tapered up toward the front. It's not crucial, but I like to have a bit of a thread bump right there that the CDC hackle I'm going to tie in can kind of get propped out by. So I've finished that part of the dubbing. I'm going to pull the tinsel over the top, tie that down. Get a couple dubbing straggler fibers out there. Then we're just going to wrap our wire over the top. 3 to 4 wraps is all you need. And then break that off. There's no need to use scissors on that wire, and dull them. Okay, now we're going to add a CDC soft tackle. So you're going to start with a feather like this, but if you just start wrapping this, you're going to end up with a whole heck of a lot of fibers on there. Now, a lot of people will do this in a dubbing loop, and you can do that, but at least for me, I've found that when I do the or the CDC fibers in a dubbing loop and then wrap them that way, they don't tend to last as long. They kind of get pulled out after a few fish, and you lose a lot of your fibers. So I like to leave them on the quill and just wrap them as is. But I prep the feather first by stripping kind of one half of it off. I leave a little bit on the one side, and then I leave all of the other side. And that way I don't put too much on here. So then you want to stroke the fibers back so that all you have is the tip here. And I'm going to do a pinch wrap. So I put the thread between my fingers, have the thread up vertically, go around the bottom of the hook, and I'm not putting any pressure on that thread yet. And then once it's back vertical, I let it slip through my fingers and pull on it. That locks that feather in place. Get in there and trim the base of it out. If it's in that slot, sometimes you can miss it, and so you want to make sure you prop it back. All right, then grab some hackle pliers here and hold on to this, and we're just going to make 1.5 about turns here maybe. That first wrap a lot of times doesn't get many fibers, or the first like quarter turn, so I go about 1.25, 1.5. It's easy to put too many fibers on though, so don't do 2 full wraps or 3 full wraps, you know, and take some of those fibers out off that feather before you go. All right, once that's wrapped, stroke the fibers back and make a turn or 2 of thread to make sure they're facing the right direction. And we're just going to cover those thread wraps up with a little more dubbing. And now I'm going to add a little super glue to the base of that thread. Make 2 turns and then do a 3 or 4 turn whip finish here. And that is pretty much the finished blowtorch, but before we're done, I'm going to pull it out of the vise. I'll try and do it for the camera here. And I take the fibers on half the fly and stroke them back, and then just break them off at about the length of that tag with my fingers, and then rotate it the other way and do the same thing. And I broke them off a little bit short on the bottom, but that's okay. Now I've got fibers that are the length I want. You want them maybe back of the hook or a little bit longer, you know, just so that they're about the same length or just a smidge longer than that tag, but not so long that they're giant and really slowing down the descent of the fly a bunch, in addition to looking too large. But that's the finished purple blowtorch, ready to go fool some trout on your local river.